a little GUI version of the Magic Ball game or toy. There's quite a few apps for this available on sort of Android devices and iPhone and so on. It's actually quite an easy thing to put together, so I thought we'd have a go at that. So, just put a couple of comments in there. Okay, so as we're going to do a GUI, we need to import some things from tkinter. So I'm just going to do import style, which just means we get all of the things that we need from that. We're also going to need random later on. So what we're going to do actually is going to start off by just sorting out the GUI, but before we get onto the nuts and bolts of the program. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little kind of dummy function here called submit, just so that I can do some testing as I go along. So all that is going to do is just print working. Just means that later on I can check that things are okay. So the first thing to do when we're setting up a GUI is to create what's called a root object. So that is it's an object in the TK class. Whoops. So a lot of the time when you're doing object-oriented programming, we use capital letters for classes. At the moment, you don't really need to worry too much about that, but that is something which we'll do more on later. Just before I do any more as well, I'm just going to put in the final line of the program. And again, that's just so that I can test things out really before before we go too far with things. So if you put root.main loop, that means that it'll actually start the loop and show us what we've got so far. So the next thing to do is within that root object we're going to create a frame. I'm going to call that app. So again, frame has got a capital F because it's a class. And what we have to do is tell it that it belongs to this root object that we've created. That's known as its master. We also need to do app.grid, which just means that it displays certain widgets and things within that frame correctly later on. We better give it a title. If you've done had a look at the tutorial on Fibonacci that uses a GUI, then you'll have seen this before. It's quite straightforward, and you can also do root geometry, which gives you an initial size for the window. So I'm going to go for 225 times 325. Seemed to work quite well. You can obviously change that if you don't like the way it looks. So now that should actually mean that we've got enough there to have a look at that now. So let's just start that up. Yep, so there we go. We've got our window. It says Magic 8 Ball. It's the right size. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is that often with programs like this, you find that you can't actually change the size of the window. The user's not able to do that. That's quite a useful thing, I think, because it can make your program look a bit strange. So we're going to do that. That's how you do it. Root resizable 0, which means it can't be resized horizontally or vertically. We're also going to do a thing called a bind. So we're going to bind the return key. So you need to use angle bracket, return with a capital R, close your angle bracket, close your quotes, and I'm going to bind that to this submit function that I've written, at least a dummy version of. So let's just see how far we're getting with that. Okay. I'll just remember something that I mustn't forget, which is that particular way of calling that function will actually pass a parameter to the submit function, which the submit function won't like. So if I put star ignore there, it'll ignore that. So if I do that now, I've got my window. It can't be resized. It's not going to let me do that. If I press let me just move this so we can see it. If I press the return key, hopefully it should say working. Yeah, okay, so that's okay. I'll just show you what happens if I leave that out for the sake of argument. So if I leave that out and I press return, it's going to pass me an error because what's happened is it's told submit some information about what key was pressed, I think. So that causes a little error. So star ignore just means ignore if anything is passed to you, because we don't need to bother about it. Okay, got the sort of basis there of our root window, but what we need to do now is set up some widgets. That's what we call the little bits and bobs within it. So the first thing we're going to do is make a label. So that we're going to call it ask underscore label. It's a label, so that's going to have a capital L. It's within this app object that we're creating. It's going to have some text in it, which is going to say please ask a yes or no question. Then we need to tell it where to put that in the actual grid. So if I do ask underscore label dot grid, and I'm going to put it on. I'm going to put that one on row 0, column 0. I'm going to give it column span equals 2, which just means that it will spread itself across, oh no, 3, I think I'll go for 3 columns. I'm going to go pad y equals 5, which just means it will space it out a little bit from whatever's above and below. I think I might actually put pad x as well, just so that we get a little bit of space. That might throw out my sizes a little bit, but we can play with that in a minute. And then another thing that you see often with these types of program is that, oh no, sorry, that's fine. Yeah, that's what I wanted, I think. Now we need to put in a box for actually the text entry, so that's going to be called ask box, and that's called a entry object. Again, it's within this app thing that we're creating, and I'm just going to give it a width. I'm going to give it 30 characters width. That should be okay. Let's give that a grid position. So I want that to be on the next row down. I want it to be in column 0. That's going to have the same column span as well. Pad y equals 5 again. Pad x equals 5. So, and then we need to do one other thing as well, which is I want to put the focus automatically on this box. So if I go ask box dot focus underscore force, that will just mean that when you start the program, it automatically puts the cursor in that box, in theory. So let's have a look. Oh, I've done something wrong there. Oh yeah, I've just... yeah. Okay. So yeah, that has thrown out my sizes a little bit, so I might just have to make it a bit wider. But I've got my yes or no question, and I've got my text entry box, and the cursor's there already, so that's as it should be. So just for now, let's make that 250. See if that's okay. Yeah, that is not quite what I expected. Yeah, that's better. So I've made it to 300. We might need to just change that in a minute, but that's okay. That's because I've changed it slightly from the original thing with that pad X. Okay, so that's looking quite good. Now we want a button now, really. So even though we've set the return key to automatically call that submit function, we'll make a button. So it's a button. It's within app. The text is going to be shake the 8-ball. Now I need to set the shake command, so I just go shake command equals submit. So that is also going to call this function. Then I want to sort the grid out for that. It's going to be in row 2. It's going to be in column 1 this time because I want it to be sort of more central, and it's going to be pad y equals 5. Don't think we need to worry about any x padding there. Now the next bit is that I want a picture to be included in this one. So I'm going to create a label with an image. So I'm just going to go picture, call it that, equals label app. Then I need to give that a grid position. So that's going to be in row 3 now because we're moving downwards, and column 1 again because it's going to be fairly central. Now I'm going to call the image 8-ball, so I need to load that into a variable, and this is the command that I'm going to use: photo image file equals 8-ball. Now this, I will actually put this image somewhere where you can download it in the comments when I've uploaded the video. Basically, by default, TKInter only likes GIF files and a thing called PPM files. If you've got the Python image library installed, then it will take a wider range. But for now, I'm just going with one of these that will work pretty much, for everybody. So picture equals image. So now I'm going to tell it that's the image I want it to use. 8-ball. Right, that time we checked to see if that's working now, because I've probably made some sort of an error there. Let's see. No, that's okay. So I've got my cursor blinking there. I've got my shake the 8-ball. If I press that, it says it's working. And I've got a picture of the 8-ball, so that's looking alright. It's perhaps a bit wider than I wanted, but that's not a problem. Okay, so the next thing to do is we need a text entry, sorry, not a text entry box, we need a text box in which we're going to display the answer. So again, this time it's called text. It's in this app thing. We're going to give it the same width as our entry box. We're going to give it a height of 3. That should be fine for all the messages that are likely to come up. Wrap equals word just means that it'll word wrap, so it won't. It'll just make the text look nice in there. And one other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say state equals disabled. What that means is that the user will not be able to type in that box, because that would be a bit odd, really. Text.grid. So we're down in the 4th row now. Again, we're in column 1. Sorry, column 0. We're going to do this column span equals 3 again. And we're going to do pad y equals 5. Pad x equals 5. Okay. So, might just be worth just checking to see how that's looking. Okay, so now I've got a nice big text window at the bottom there. Again, I think I need to slightly change the size of my window because I've obviously changed things a little bit there. If I call that 340. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of space underneath, so that's looking okay. Right. Oh, I should have just checked to see, just to show you that if I try and click down there, it'll let me highlight things in there if I want to copy and paste the answer, but I'm not allowed to type in there. There's no cursor going to appear there. Okay, so that's pretty much the GUI sorted out, actually. So now we can go back to the submit function and sort that out. But perhaps even before we do that, we could do with getting in some of the answers that we're going to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these as some lists, and I'm going to have a few different options actually, which you'll see as I go through. Oops. Okay, so the first one is going to be answers equals. Now I've actually popped these into a text file just because I didn't want to waste too much of your time watching me type them in. So I've got, these are the ones which come with the 8-ball. There's 20 answers actually in the original 8-ball, and you can see them. I've added a few other ones just that I found on the internet that are quite funny. But then I'm actually going to put some other ones in as well because I want to just make my program a little bit more reactive to things that people put in. So I'm going to have some, I've called them error messages. They're just things that happen in a different. Actually, this is the one which happens if you don't put a question mark in, just because I thought I'd insist on that. And then I'm also going to put some ones for if somebody just puts in a number. So I just thought that would be kind of fun. So I'm going to call that, I think I call that all numbers, if the question that they put in is all numbers. Okay, so that is fairly straightforward. You can have a look through those if you want. You can make up your own answers. What I might do is put the text file in my comments as well as something you can download, because there's quite a bit of typing involved in that. Okay, so now we need to actually make the function that we've created do something sensible. So I'm going to put in a docstring. This function. So that's what it does. So the triple quotes there just is what we use for when we want to do use it for multi-line comments actually, but it's also useful for the docstring. So the first thing we need to do is actually get the text out of that box. So question equals ask box get. So that'll just take whatever's in that box and put it into this variable called question. Now, like I say, I wanted to just make my program perhaps a little bit more intelligent than the Magic 8-Ball toy itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check whether the user actually entered anything as well at all. So if my question is the empty string, so it's nothing there at all, then I'm going to set my message to didn't ask anything. Okay, so that's that. Then I'm going to go for elif question is digit. So this is a string method that we haven't looked at before, I don't think, and it just checks to see if whatever that is in that string is actually just all numbers. So now we're going to go for the random choice thing that we've used before, random.choice all numbers. So it's going to choose one of the statements in that list. Then I'm going to go for elif. Oops, sorry. So this is how we build up a series of different options. So if the first one is satisfied, it does that and then skips over the others. Otherwise, it starts running through the other elifs, and then there's also a final else just to catch anything that doesn't fit into the previous conditions. So if the question doesn't end with, so if not question dot ends with a question mark, because I'm going to be a bit picky about this, then I'm going to go for message equals random dot choice error messages. So that's just going to basically say, well, I'm not going to answer that because you didn't have a question. While I was doing this, I just thought for one as well, that if somebody just types in a load of garbage with no spaces, I wasn't going to be too happy about answering that either. So if there's no space in the question, then we're going to go for message equals okay. So if we've passed through all of those and none of those have happened, then probably we've got something that at least roughly looks like a question. So we're going to have message equals random dot choice answers. Okay, now I've also written a little function, or I'm going to write a little function which is called display, which we're going to use to display that message. Could have just done it there, but this is the way that I decided to go for it. So def display message, might as well just use the same variable name. So we'll put a doc string in for this as well. So just if I just close my triple quotes there. So the first thing to do really is we're going to delete what's in the ask box, which I just think that makes sense. Otherwise, the person could just keep asking the same question, which would be a little bit pointless. So we're going to go 0.end. So from the beginning to the end, we're going to delete everything. Then we've got to actually change the state of this text box, because at the moment we've disabled it, which means we can't write to it either. So we have to say that the state is now normal. Then we can actually write something to it, but before we do that, we better just check that there's nothing in there already. So text delete 0.0, so from the beginning to the end. Actually, did I call it text or did I call it txt? I called it txt. So that will just put our message into the box. And then, of course, we don't want the user going in and messing with that, so let's go txt state equals disabled. So that means that, once again, the box cannot be written to. So let's just see if that works. Probably I've made some sort of mistake there. Yeah, it's not happy with that. Yeah, didn't need that. Okay, so just for starters, if I pressed enter, it's going to say you didn't ask anything. So that's working quite well. If I type in a question, it's going to say you may rely on it. If I type in some garbagey numbers, shake the 8-ball, it's going to just give me a kind of joke answer. If I try again, it might ask me to say that. If I type something else that hasn't got a question mark in, hopefully, didn't anyone ever teach to use a question mark? I don't like one-word questions. So that seems to be working pretty well. And it's just a demonstration really of how you can throw together a simple little GUI application. I've introduced a few little string methods and so on there as well. So hope you enjoyed that tutorial. There will be some more available, and I'll make sure that I put the image file that you need and this little text file with the lists on as a download in my comments. Thanks very much for watching, and that's all for now.